2.5 days. That's how long David "Heavy D" Sparks says he sat alone in a solitary cell at the Salt Lake County Jail, arrested by federal marshals on his way to speak at a leadership summit. By the time he walked out, the show that made him famous had already been over for 2 years, his business empire was being sold off in pieces, and the friendship that once defined an entire television genre was nowhere to be found in his statement to the cameras. 5 months later, his wife of 16 years would file for divorce. This is the story of how a church meetup between two guys named Dave turned into a Discovery Channel hit, and how that same story ended in a federal courtroom, a jail cell, and near total silence between the two men who built it together. The origin story is almost too simple for how big it became. David Sparks and David Kiley met at a church singles event in Utah, discovered they shared an obsession with diesel trucks, and started working on vehicles together. What began as helping out with an excavation and equipment business turned into custom truck builds, which turned into YouTube videos of those builds, the kind of loud, over-the-top content that diesel enthusiasts couldn't stop watching. The videos eventually caught the attention of Jay Leno, a well-known car collector, who featured the pair on his automotive web series. That exposure is widely credited with putting the Diesel brothers on Discovery Channel's radar. The show premiered in January 2016 and ran for 7 seasons, becoming one of the network's more reliable unscripted hits. Sparks brought the engineering ambition and the big builds. Kiley brought the humor and the everyman likability that made the show easy to watch. Neither man is actually anyone's brother. The name was just a branding choice, but the chemistry read as real, because by most accounts, it was. For a while, that was the whole story. Two friends from Utah, a shop in Woods Cross, and a hit TV show. But underneath the success, a legal problem was already forming, and it had nothing to do with ratings. In 2017, a Utah-based non-profit called Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment sued Sparks, Kiley, fellow cast member Joshua Stewart, and their associated businesses. The group's core allegation was straightforward, that the Diesel brothers were removing legally required pollution control equipment from diesel trucks, a practice that produces the thick black exhaust known as rolling coal, and that some of this activity was happening on camera, as part of the show itself. Doing so is a violation of the Federal Clean Air Act, since tampering with emissions control systems on vehicles used on public roads is illegal regardless of whether the truck is later resold for off-road use. According to Wikipedia's summary of the case, and consistent with reporting from outlets like the Salt Lake Tribune and Equipment World, the Physicians Group didn't just allege wrongdoing, they backed it up. They purchased a modified truck directly from Sparks' business and had it independently tested. The results were dramatic. The truck was found to produce dozens of times more pollutants and far more particulate matter than a standard, unmodified vehicle would emit. In 2018, a federal court issued an injunction barring further modifications of this kind. But according to court records, the conduct allegedly continued anyway. In March 2020, U.S. District Judge Robert J. Shelby ruled that Sparks, Hoskins, and Stewart had violated the Clean Air Act on hundreds of separate occasions and had breached the earlier injunction, resulting in roughly $850,000 in combined penalties. The following year, the court also ordered Sparks and a co-defendant to pay legal fees to the plaintiffs, a figure that court records put at over $928,000. Sparks has never fully accepted the framing of that case. In public comments, he said he believed at the time that his modifications were legal for off-road use, and that he was attempting to work with the Environmental Protection Agency to stay compliant. But the rulings didn't go his way, and paying the judgment turned out to be its own long-running fight. While the environmental case dragged on, an entirely separate legal threat was building, this one from Italy. Diesel S.p.A., the fashion company behind the Diesel clothing brand, filed suit in 2019 against Diesel Power Gear, the merchandise line built by Sparks, Kiley, and Stewart around the Diesel brothers' name. The case, filed in the Southern District of New York, alleged trademark infringement, trademark dilution, and unfair competition. According to Bloomberg Law and other legal trade outlets, the court sided with Diesel S.p.A. in stages. It first found that the DPG marks were confusingly similar to Diesel's established trademarks in the context of how they were displayed: physical storefronts, website branding, and merchandise. It then found that Diesel's trademark qualified as legally famous, meaning Diesel Power Gear's use of a similar name counted as dilution, and that this had been done with what the court called reckless disregard for Diesel's rights. The remaining question was money. Diesel S.p.A. argued it was entitled to Diesel Power Gear's full net sales figure, around $59.1 million. In September 2023, Judge Jennifer Rochon called that number excessive and instead reduced it by 80%, landing on a final damages award of $11.8 million. Stack that on top of the environmental penalties and legal fees, and by 2023 the Diesel brothers' business empire was facing well over $12 million in combined legal exposure, two entirely unrelated federal cases, one about air pollution and one about a t-shirt brand, both landing hard in the same few years. Somewhere in the middle of all this legal pressure, the television show itself wound down. Diesel Brothers aired its final season on Discovery in 2020, and by most accounts, the decision to stop wasn't a cancellation, it was a mutual choice to leave network television behind in favor of independent YouTube content, where Sparks and Kylie would have more creative control and could keep more of the revenue themselves. It's a move plenty of reality stars have made in the streaming era, and on its face, it looked like a normal business pivot rather than the beginning of a fracture. But it's worth noting that this transition happened quietly, without the kind of send-off fans might expect for a show that ran 7 seasons. And it lines up almost exactly with the period when the legal bills started becoming impossible to ignore. The environmental case didn't end with the 2020 and 2021 rulings, it entered a new phase: enforcement. Sparks and his co-defendants were found in contempt of the original court order on June 24, 2024, for failing to comply with its terms. According to reporting from ABC4 and legal outlets tracking the case, Sparks was found in contempt a second time on August 4, 2025, this time for transferring property in a way the earlier contempt order had specifically prohibited. That's roughly when the public liquidation began. In the fall of 2025, Sparks announced what looked like a major garage sale, trucks, equipment, and shop inventory going up for sale, framed publicly as a business move. According to court filings and reporting from The Drive and other outlets, U.S. District Judge Robert Shelby found that Sparks had, among other things, transferred vehicles including a Tesla and a Ram truck despite being explicitly ordered not to move assets, failed to submit required financial records, and failed to deposit liquidation proceeds into a court-mandated account. On October 2, 2025, Shelby ruled that Sparks had repeatedly and willfully violated the court's orders and authorized U.S. Marshals to arrest him. On October 7, 2025, Sparks was arrested in Salt Lake City and booked into the Salt Lake County Jail. His attorney, Cole Cannon, was quick to draw a legal distinction that got lost in a lot of the headlines. This was not a criminal charge. Civil contempt is a coercive tool, not a punitive one. Its entire purpose is to force compliance with a prior court order, and the person held in contempt can typically secure their own release simply by complying. As Cannon put it to People magazine at the time, no crime had been alleged, and the arrest stemmed from a civil dispute over the collection of legal fees. Sparks was released on October 9, 2025, after reaching a stipulation with the plaintiffs to provide the financial disclosures the court had been asking for. In the following days, he posted his own account of what happened, describing being taken into custody while preparing to fly out to speak at Utah's One Utah Summit, and describing his time in the maximum security wing of the jail, by his account, roughly 2.5 days in solitary confinement, apart from the general jail population. In that video and in a follow-up, longer interview later that month, Sparks pushed back hard on how the case had been portrayed. He said the plaintiff's attorneys had asked for financial records covering every transaction over $5,000 across all of his companies going back to 2020, a request he described as more exhaustive than what most large corporations keep on file. He also said the situation had been complicated by the unexpected death of his longtime accountant in December 2024, which he said resulted in lost passwords and records that made compliance harder than the court's order accounted for. He maintains he offered the opposing side full access to his shop, office, home, and cabin to review records in person, and that they declined. Whether that fully explains the pattern of non-compliance the court identified is a matter that ultimately played out in the judge's rulings, not in Sparks' YouTube videos, but it's the account he's given publicly, and it's worth including as a side of it. So where was Dave Kiley through all of this? Largely, out of the spotlight on these specific legal matters. Kylie wasn't the one named in the 2025 arrest warrant, though he had been a co-defendant, along with Stewart, in the original 2017 Clean Air Act suit and the related trademark case. Public reporting and later interviews suggest the split between the two Daves wasn't a single dramatic falling out. Sparks has described it less as a fight and more as a gradual drift. Two men who once finished each other's sentences on camera, pulled apart by years of legal battles that consumed one partner's time and energy in ways the other wasn't necessarily carrying in equal measure. The show ending in 2023, the years of litigation, and the diverging paths each man took afterward all appear to have played a role. And those paths really have diverged. In February 2024, Sparks acquired rights connected to Nikola Corporation's cancelled Badger truck project, originally a hydrogen-electric pickup concept that Nikola shelved in 2020, and has been building those rights into a new venture called EMBBR Motors, focused on hydrogen and electric vehicle development. It's a striking pivot for someone whose public identity was built almost entirely around diesel performance and, at times, the very kind of emissions-defeating behavior that landed him in federal court. Kylie, meanwhile, has largely stayed in the diesel and motorsports lane that made the Diesel brothers famous, continuing to drive custom diesel-powered trucks in Monster Jam-style events. The two men who started in the same Utah garage are now, professionally, headed in close to opposite directions, one toward clean energy branding, the other still rooted in the diesel performance world they built together. The personal fallout didn't stop with the business. On March 10, 2026, Ashley Sparks filed for divorce from David Sparks in a Utah court, according to documents reported by TMZ, Us Weekly, and other outlets. The couple had reportedly met at church in Utah in 2008 and married in August 2010, sharing 3 children together. No reason for the filing was listed in the court documents, and neither Ashley nor David has publicly detailed what led to the decision. The timing is hard to ignore. The filing came almost exactly 5 months after David's October 2025 arrest, and outlets covering the divorce have noted the obvious financial complexity a federal judgment of this size can add to a divorce, including questions about whether penalties tied to David's individual business conduct are treated as his separate debt or as a shared marital liability under Utah law. Those are legal questions still working through the courts, not settled facts, and it's worth being cautious about drawing a straight line from the arrest to the marriage ending. Marriages end for all kinds of reasons that rarely make it into a court filing. Strip away the trucks, the trademarks, and the reality TV lighting, and what's left is a fairly familiar story. A partnership that thrived under one set of pressures and struggled to survive a completely different set. Diesel Brothers wasn't undone by declining ratings or a falling out on camera. It was undone, slowly, by 2 federal lawsuits that had nothing to do with each other, a public liquidation, an arrest that made national headlines, and a friendship that seems to have quietly faded somewhere in the middle of all of it. Sparks says he's not angry, just motivated to turn the experience into advocacy against what he sees as regulatory overreach. Kylie has said comparatively little. And the Diesel Brothers brand, for now, exists as 2 separate men doing 2 very different things with what they built. One chasing hydrogen and electric vehicles, the other still burning diesel in front of a crowd. Was it principle, pressure, or just the ordinary math of 2 people's lives moving in different directions once the cameras stopped rolling? That's the part neither Dave has fully answered yet. Sources referenced: Wikipedia entries for Dave, Heavy D, Sparks and Diesel Brothers, ABC 4 News, The Drive, Bloomberg Law and the Fashion Law, Diesel S.p.A. v. Diesel Power Gear, LLC, SDNY, TMZ, Us Weekly, People, court filings and rulings from the U.S. District Court for the District of Utah and the Southern District of New York.